Natasha, thank you.
Hi there. Welcome, everyone. I will be here a little technical support if needed. And we will be, as mentioned, we are recording this webinar. It's live streamed on YouTube and it will be shared on Facebook. If you have questions, you can write it in a chat box or Q&A. We have a little break, 10 minutes break. So we'll try to show you some music during that break. If there are any questions, you can send us a message here in chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Natasha. So Natasha and Michael are doing the technical support for today. So I would like to welcome you all to this very important session about the Sustainable Development Goals and how we can better use it in combination with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, how one is mainstreaming the disability rights and how the other is enforcing the human rights of persons with disabilities. So we have a lot of very interesting panel speakers that will show us how we can use both of them and having more impact in order to really realize and integrate into laws the human rights of every person with disabilities. And we will start firstly with having an explanation what the sustainable developments are. And I know that we have 70 goals and there are targets in it, and that the CRPD itself, the European Commission ratified the CRPD, and we have every member state that also ratified the CRPD. But how can we enforce the rights by using the CRPD to implement the SDGs and vice versa? Also, we have the disability strategy now coming on. So how can all those new treatments and legislation and strategies being used in order to really have more impact on our lives? That's what our panelists will definitely show us and give us some hints and some recommendations on how we can use and some clear explications on how we can use all of this. If we use then leave no one behind and the nothing about us without us of the both treaties, I think that we will realize a lot of things. So without any further time consuming, I will pass the floor to our first speaker, who is Peter Odi. He is the European volunteer for EMIL for the moment, and he will give us a presentation on what are the Sustainable Development Goals and what we can do with it. So, Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nadia, for the introduction, and hi all. It's great to be here. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see my document. Just 1 second. Okay, can everyone see? I hope everyone can see that. This is my, yeah, okay. So I'm just going to briefly talk about, just to say, this is an abridged kind of rough notes version of a paper I have written about the SDGs and the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. The full paper will be published on the ENIL website if you want to read it in more detail. This is kind of the skeleton version, for lack of a better word. So I'm just going to, and even then it might be a bit lengthy, so I'm going to just breeze through it. And yeah, if you want to read, if you want to get better knowledge, you can read the full written document. But this is, so basically the UN CRPD is enshrined as the highest point of disability law in the world, declared in 2016 and open for signatories the following year for nations the world over. It has the legal prestige and power to be used as an effective tool in any state, by any state parties and NGOs, independent activists' arsenal when trying to improve the rights of disabled people. However, no convention is an island, and other items exist with the ever-growing international toolbox that can hopefully complement the CRPD. Today, we shall be briefly examining one of those items, the UN SDGs, Sustainability Development Goals, and how they. So I'm just going to run through there are 17 Sustainability Development Goals. They were built as a kind of continuation of the Millennium Goals, and they were agreed upon, I think it was 2011. So yeah, I'm just going to run through the list of 17, and then I will explain how I think they connect to the interesting ways in which they connect to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So the 17 are end poverty in all formats everywhere, end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages, ensure inclusive and equally and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and resources for all, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all, promote sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment and decent work for all, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive, sustainable industrialization and foster innovation, reduce inequality within and among countries, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe and resilient and sustainable, ensures the sustainable consumption and productive patterns, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts, conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas and marine resources for sustainable development, protect, restore and promote sustainable use of territorial ecosystems to sustainably imagine forest combat desertification and halt and reserve land degradation and halt biodiversity loss, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, promote access to justice for all and build effective, accountable and inclusive institutions at all levels, strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Okay, so I hope with those you can see that the word inclusive is actually used a lot of times, and that's, I think, actually quite good to start off from a jumping off point to relate it to Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and that is a document that argues for the inclusion of disabled people. So to give one example, just to start off, SDG 1 about ending poverty can be linked to Articles 19 on independent living of the CRPD. It can also be linked to Article 24 on education, Article 27 on employment, and Article 28 adequate standard of living and social protection, because you can't really end poverty in any meaningful sense unless you have introduced policies at both national and international levels that address the demands of those articles within the CRPD. An even better example of how the SDGs can be connected to the CRPD is SDG 11, to make human settlements inclusive, safe and resilient. This single SDG alone can be linked to the following CRPD articles, UNCRPD Article General 4, obligations, General 5, non-discrimination, General 9, accessibility, situations of risk and humanitarian emergencies, liberty and Article 14, liberty and security of person, Article 19, liberty of movement, nationality, living, Article 19, living independently and being included in the community, personal mobility, 26, habilitation and rehabilitation. Some of these may not be completely obvious, but so for instance, general obligations, Article 4, I would say that links to it because that article requires states to strive to their utmost to actually take the CRPD seriously and to implement its commands. So it's a good, I think generally, I think speaking, I think it's good to try and link everything to Article 4 in some way because it is quite explicit in its requests. But like as they go up, but like again, you can't really have sustainable and resilient human settlements unless, well, I mean, they are fit for all humans. So for instance, take 26, Article 26 on habilitation and rehabilitation from the CRPD. It specifies in it that disabled people should have the right to choose where and what vocation they want to practice, and they shouldn't be hindered by discriminatory barriers. Obviously, this in itself links back to earlier articles, such as Article 19 and Article 18 and Article 5, non-discrimination, but relating to the SDGs, you can't really have a sustainable and inclusive human settlement unless people are actually have freedom to choose how they operate within that settlement. And obviously, as a big part of that, so you wouldn't be just looking at habitation and rehabilitation. You would be also looking at like independent living. Is there disabling barriers that are preventing disabled people in this human settlement from achieving their full potential? If so, then you need to address you need to introduce policies or campaign for policies if you're an activist that complement Article 19 while thinking about the requirements of SDG 11. And again, personal mobility, Article 20, that's very relevant because you can't really, I mean, you can't viably live anywhere unless you actually have the mobility and independence to move, to have the freedom to do whatever you want within that place. Obviously, there is an SDG around climate change as well, and the right to safety that is guaranteed within the CRPD around emergencies is noteworthy. So yeah, I hope that those have shown those have shown some good ways in which you can, I guess, in which you can link the documents. And I'm just going to end by saying you can get involved in the SDG process through the voluntary national review. This could be linked to the shadow reports, which our panelists will talk about later, because voluntary national review is a mechanism for basically ensuring that the SDGs are implemented by state parties or nation states, to use a better term. It ensures that they are actually being taken seriously, and it is a way to review process progress, but also lack of progress. So DPOs could use could be engaged with this process like they engage with shadow reports and try to connect the two. I would suggest mentioning shadow, bring up the SDGs and the voluntary national reviews within shadow reports, getting involved at regional levels. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. Getting involved during the global review at HLPF. So this is high-level political forum. This is where representatives of state parties come together to discuss the implementation or lack of implementation of the SDGs, what needs to happen in the future, are they meeting the deadlines that they set out in the SDGs, because it's important. I think the goal is to have most of them met by the end of the decade, I think, or 2030, or so. It's quite an ambitious target from what I remember. So at least the latest high-level political forum is actually in July of this year. So that is something to keep an eye on. Obviously, it's easier said than done to actually attend these meetings. They can be expensive. It's better with COVID. There will hopefully be more remote sessions in the future, even past the pandemic. So that would be, I would suggest, engaging with the high-level political forum, and finally, follow up the high-level political forum with national government. Well, yeah, just contact your, if you're a DPO or NGO or independent disabled activist, contact your national government and ensure that we go listen, hey, this is all the commitments you made during the last high-level political forum. Are you actually acting on these? And how are you going to tie these to the CRPD when you're dealing with the SDGs? And can we help or monitor the situation with you? Okay, so that was a whistle-stop tour of the SDGs and hopefully how they tied into the CRPD. I have a more full paper, as I said, but I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop there, and I am going to hand over to the next speaker. Thank you. Who is going to be
okay. I'll take it over now. Thank you very much, Peter, for highlighting that also within the SDG, there is that possibility to report, to be active as a disabled person organizations, and to follow up if the rights of person with disability within the implementation of the SDGs is respected. And also for highlighting, Peter, the connection between the development goals and a lot of articles of the CRPD. So thank you very much for this. So our next speaker will be somebody who is to explain us what is the role of the CRPD committee secretary and how the shadow reporting can play a big role. So I would like to introduce you to Ms. Pedro Ros Catherine. She's a human rights officer at the committee secretary since 2012. She's a lawyer by profession, and she has been working with persons with disabilities and their organizations since the adoption of the convention in 2007 back in Colombia, which is her country of origin. So, Catherine, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you so much to the European Independent Network for this invitation and for having me this morning with you. I'm very pleased and honored to share this conversation with you. I was asked by Emil to speak about the role of the Secretariat and the participation of civil society in the committee's work. So I have prepared a very short presentation that if the organizers could could give me like rights to share it with you on the screen, I will do it now.
Katrin, now you should be able to do it. Is it okay? Can you do it? Ah, we see you now. But you're muted. Can you?
Thank you.
Is it okay now?
It is fine.
Yeah, okay.
I can.
Okay, good.
I don't see where can I share. Excuse me. Share screen. So I think you should be able to see it now.
It's good. Seems good.
Perfect. So, yes, so the participation and involvement of civil society, and especially in the reporting procedures. Reporting procedures are called those processes in which a state party of the convention provides written information about how it is implementing the convention, and the committee evaluates or assess indeed if the state party is fulfilling or accomplishing the implementation of the convention or not. So the first thing I would like to refer to and to remember to all of us is that participation of persons with disabilities in the CRPD is crucial, is critical, and is very important. Especially the persons with disabilities were the drafters of the convention. They were the ones who discussed in New York the content of the convention, and the convention, this legal instrument, this document, is the result of the work of persons with disabilities. And this work and this spirit of participation is also a part of the CRPD itself. We have mentioned to involvement and participation of persons with disabilities in Article 4.3 of the Convention, about involvement in all public decision making, in Article 29 about participation in organizations in public and political life, and also in Article 33 about persons with disabilities participating in independent monitoring of the convention. So, and also the committee has agreed on a general comment, which is a document of jurisprudence. In this document, it also reiterates that the participation of persons with disabilities is crucial in different aspects. So for the committee's work, persons with disabilities can participate in reporting procedures. Is again this assessment of state party reports. Also, persons with disabilities and their organizations can submit communications or complaints concerning how their rights are being allegedly affected by laws or by decisions at the internal level. Also, persons with disabilities through their organizations can work and participate in inquiry procedures, which are in relation to violations of the rights of persons with disabilities, which are systematic or extended in a state party, but also providing their comments, their opinions, and also being co-drafters of general comments, statements, or guidelines. I will put some examples later on in a couple of minutes, but these are the four areas in which you as organizations of persons with disabilities can interact with the committee. And always the role of the Secretariat of the committee, in this case, like my role, is to support and to make the link, to make a bridge between the civil society and organizations of persons with disabilities and the committee as an independent international mechanism. So we are here like to support how you can work together with the committee. The heading of this slide, which I'm presenting, is types of participation. So in the written reports is participation through written reports. So this means to writing a report and sending it to the committee. The second type is in closed briefings. Organizations of persons with disabilities can request participation in briefings by the committee and in bilateral meetings with country rapporteurs. So these are the three main aspects, and I will refer to written reports. What it matters. I was thinking how can I present what are alternative reports or the importance of alternative reports, and what matters in terms of alternative reports is first to have like clear messages about what civil society, what organizations of persons with disabilities consider are the main problems, the main issues, the main topics that the committee should be aware or that are affecting or impacting them in their countries, in their real, like in their daily lives. That otherwise, if you do not transmit these messages, the committee really do not have any other mean to get to know what is happening in the reality of persons with disabilities in a certain country. So another thing that matters is to take into account the diversity of persons with disabilities. And I mean to take into account women with disabilities and their organizations in preparing alternative reports, and also in making presentations and participating in closed briefings or in bilateral briefings. I'm going back to my former slide, which is written reports, closed briefings, bilateral meetings. So women with disabilities, also organizations of young persons with disabilities, organizations of persons with intellectual disabilities, organizations of persons with psychosocial disabilities, all the diversity of persons with disabilities should be preparing their own reports or taking part in a common alternative report to be submitted to the committee. Third, what matters, to send or to be in contact with the committee through the Secretariat in advance of the committee sessions. So for instance, to take into account that you should submit reports at least 3 to 4 weeks in advance of the starting of a committee session. So in this way, we can distribute the information coming from you among committee members, and they will have enough time to read, to understand, and then to have a better quality of dialogue with the governments and with the state party representatives, and also with you as organizations of persons with disabilities during the closed and bilateral briefings. And also to ask in advance for meetings, for instance, to the participation in closed briefings. Organizations should ask in advance to the Secretariat. The Secretariat usually prepares a document, an explanatory document about indicating the dates in which a session or a committee meeting is taking place, the modalities and the deadlines or the time frame in which you should submit requests for participation in closed briefings or to submit written reports. Also, what matters is the word limits. We have a word count to translate written reports. Written reports by civil society are not translated officially by United Nations, but if you wish to send a report in an original language and then to translated into English, which is one of the official languages of the committee, or in French, or in Spanish. These are official languages of the committee. Some committee members speak Spanish, other committee members right now speak French, but the majority of them speak English. So you have to take this into account, because a report, an alternative report, which is very long, for instance, like 50,000 words or 20,000 words, it has less possibilities to be like processed timely, to be read timely by committee members, and this is why word limits matter in this exercise. And also matters like accessible formats. Perhaps it should be the first one in the list, but accessible formats matter, because there are committee members who need, like, who use screen readers, or who use Braille, so they need enough time to make transcripts in Braille of their reports, but also easy read is a valuable format, and the committee is willing and is really interested in receiving all alternative reports in different accessible formats. And experiences that I can mention, as this is the European Network of Independent Living, I should say that the experience of the committee and from the Secretariat is that we have seen a lot of like participation and engagement of organizations of persons with disabilities in all the state parties reviews of European states, and also the United Kingdom and Great Britain. It was very relevant that organizations and grassroots organizations of persons with disabilities, such as DPAC at that time, but took place in closed briefings and submitted written information to the committee, because some of their concerns, of their proposed recommendations, were really reflected in the committee's concluding observations. And the second experience, and the most recent one, I put it because it's very recent, is organizations of persons with disabilities in France. They submitted a lot of information. The diversity of organizations submitted written reports to the committee. They also took part in private briefings, in bilateral briefings with country rapporteurs, and this really supported the work of the committee and the understanding. This permitted the committee really to understand what was the situation, and to try to prepare a good conclusions and recommendations. And my last point, my last slide is about different actors interacting. So it's not only organizations of persons with disabilities, or not only the committee, or not only the Secretariat. My message here is that really we work together. We work, like I myself, my job is to support the committee in its role, but also your work as organizations advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities is taken into account, is there. There are certain rules or a legislative framework that governs this participation, so we are not inventing or deciding every time, but we are, as a Secretariat, we are bound and we have to follow what the rules establish about participation of different actors. And this is what we have seen, for instance, actors like the committee and or the state parties, the governments of the UK or France, in the opportunities in which the committee had a dialogue. They have a role also. They have to show up in the committee sessions. They also have to do their job in terms of sending written information, as do organizations of persons with disabilities. And the latest experience that I can mention is the participation of organizations of persons with disabilities in preparing draft guidelines on the institutionalization. You will see, you will find soon on the committee's webpage information about draft guidelines on the institutionalization, and these draft guidelines, this outline, because the committee still hasn't adopted or approved the guidelines, but only an outline and a structure of the guidelines. It has been also prepared jointly with civil society organizations. And thank you, and I'm really ready to any questions or to clarify any points you may wish to. Thank you. Over.
Okay. Thank you very much, Catherine, for explaining again the importance and the role that civil society and disabled organization can play in following up the implementation of the CRPD, and how we can interact informally with the reporters and with the committee members itself, and to be very concrete in the reporting and to mention and to highlight the very important things. Thank you very much. So we will go to the next speaker, who will illustrate the experience that they had with writing a shadow report. So our next speaker is from our organization, Disabled People Against Cuts, DPAC, who's really near to our heart and memory of Debbie Julie, as always. But our next speaker is Anita Belows, and she will introduce herself and also share with us the experience they have. Thanks a lot, Anita, for accepting to be with us, and the floor is yours now.
Hello, I hope you can see me because that's my first Zoom meeting. So
Yes.
Anyway, yes, yeah, okay, thank you. I'm Anita Belows. I'm a member of DPAC. I've been for 10 years, and been involved in the complaint which led to the inquiry by the committee, the CRPD committee, and later I was involved in writing the shadow report, and I went to Geneva to make this presentation to the committee. I found quite difficult to explain what it's like to write this review, in a sense, because it started really in 2012 when a lot of people realized that what was happening in the UK was a lot of regressive measure was introduced with a disproportionate impact on disabled people. And so individuals, without knowing each other, started sending a lot of information to the committee. And when DPAC, which were Linda Burnip and Debbie Joly, two of the founders of DPAC, got in touch with the committee, what the committee said is that although they received all this submission, it was very difficult to see a coherent thread through it, and it was difficult to initiate an inquiry based on that. And that's where it was decided that we would make a complaint under the optional protocol of the CRPD. And I know somebody later would talk about that. But basically, we were asked to actually put a complaint in a format which mirror the format of the review. So that was really the blueprint of the shadow report. And it was more narrow in focus. I mean, it was really independent living, and it was social protection and participation and inclusion. But it gave us really the blueprint to do later with more confidence the shadow report. We were asked for complete secrecy, which means that there were 4 people involved in that. We couldn't talk and ask help to anybody. And I think for that reason, the committee assumed a much bigger role, more supportive role with us, because we needed a lot more guidance than it would be if you had a lot of organization involved. We could actually just, just bring their experience and expertise to that. We were just relying. Anyway, we signed our first submission, to which the government, unsurprisingly, just responded with very dismissively and saying that was not true. So we did the second submission with a second response for the government, and then a third submission. And we arrived at the time where the shadow report should be written. And basically that was just taking this inquiry, the submissions, the complaint, the response of the committee, And we took that on a stride to actually just write the review. And really the shadow report was really an extension to that, but the format was actually the same. And so it was actually, I mean, we were just building on the work we have done, for 4 years, and working with the committee with quite, very, very supportive role. And so after that, we just wrote our shadow report and went to present it to the CRPD committee in Geneva. And that was really, I mean, in that, I think it's quite unusual. It was really the achievement of the outcome of 4 years' work, because it was really building on the previous inquiry. Now, obviously, the government is still being very dismissive of the findings or whatever, but there's a proper record of what happened from 2010 and until now to the lives of disabled people in the UK. And I don't think I have more to add to that, because I think that it was actually quite, no, one thing I wanted to say too is something that we learned from our submission for the complaint is everybody is working a little bit in their own corner just on this specialist subject. But you need somebody really, or several people who have a lot of sense of organization, which actually can put all this report together. So it's presented in a format which is required from the committee, and I mean, which each kind of a complaint against one article of the convention, and that was really important to be given the structure for the inquiry to be able to do the shadow report afterwards. I think that's all, and I think that now there's a break. Is that right?
Okay, thank you very much, Anita, for highlighting the importance to persist, that after 4 years you managed at least to realize then the shadow report, and that you share that experience with us. And I hope that the government will really take into account the recommendations, and you still follow that up, I suppose.
Yes, I do. Of course, we try to. One thing I should add, because that was something I was going to mention. Actually, the government, the UK government, is not monitoring as well as it used to, and it was not monitoring very well then. But now it's publishing less and less data. It's a lot more difficult to know what's happening to disabled people now.
Okay. So yeah, meaningful participation is now the new thing you need to lobby on.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, in order to relieve a little bit who's doing the captioning, Anita, and so thanks a lot again for Deepak for joining us. So in order to give a break to our captioner, Julia, we will have a break now, 10 minutes, and then we at 1 o'clock sharp, 12 o'clock for the people in the UK, we will start again then. Thank you very much, everybody.
Nadia, can I just add, we'll put a bit of music now during the break, who wants to watch, so that you know.
Okay.
You can switch off your videos also, so there is more space.
Thank you very much. See you in 10 minutes then.
Oh, was it?
You should prepare, my dear.
Yeah, that was not good.
Yeah, it was absolutely fine. It was absolutely fine.
So that was no trouble.
Okay.
me up to fail and then put all the blame on me. So I will not watch what I say. I will not watch what I say. You can't handle me. Don't ask me to play. I'll gladly be out of your way. Really would be easier if you accepted me, but you set me up to fail and then put all the blame on me. Oh, it really would be easier if you included me, but you set me up to fail and put all the blame on me. Out in the pig pen, I was wondering again, why we're the ones in trouble when such evil wins within. Our people are lying, dying in their own excrements. When we brought some of it to you, on your walls it looked pretty cool. Can't believe they think we're doing wrong. The riot coppers with their cutters break the cuffs and move us on. You know I don't believe they think we're doing wrong. What we're doing is nothing compared to what's getting done. Officer, if you're really bored and you're looking out for crimes, we've got a list of villains abusing our rights all the time. But somehow this doesn't bother you like a slot on their land. So you come harassing us while our people feel their hand. Can't believe they think we're doing wrong. The riot coppers with their cutters break the cuffs and move us on. You know I don't believe they think we're doing against the wind and rain, still there behind the shadow of the pain. We are peeping out again, peeping out again. Holding on against the wind and rain, just surviving those of us who made the grade. We are coming out again, we're rolling out again. Come on.
Okay. Thank you for the music entertainment, Natasha. And I
It was
think
nice. Yeah. Sorry, it was a bit longer. I wanted just to finish.
so we can continue. So I'm glad to announce our next speaker from Validity. He will share his experience of how to write shadow reports and also on his legal base. So we have with us Stephen Allen, who's the co-director of the Validity Foundation. And I'll say, Stephen, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Nadia. And thank you to all of you at ENIL for the invitation to join you today. It's quite a hard task to follow that great music, but I'll do my best. We at Validity are delighted to be associate members of ENIL. And as I always say, your powerful advocacy to promote the rights to independent living and inclusion in the community really inspires us. And we greatly value the opportunity to work alongside you all and all of your brilliant members across Europe. We've already heard some excellent presentations on the Sustainable Development Goals and the crucially important role of organizations of persons with disabilities and wider civil society during periodic reviews of state party reports under the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. For my presentation, I want to share some of our experiences in working alongside persons with disabilities and their representative organizations in both Europe and Africa in the process of developing shadow reports under the CRPD. And where I can, I'll try to make some linkages with the SDGs. So for those of you that don't know us, Validity is a specialist legal advocacy organization. And we exist to promote, protect, and defend the human rights of persons with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. We do this through various activities, including strategic public interest litigation, research, and advocacy. We were originally established in 2002 and today remain headquartered in Budapest in Hungary. Currently, we have projects across Europe and East and Southern Africa, but we also engage extensively at regional and international forums. And these include the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, at the Council of Europe, and of course at the UN. So one of our key objectives is to tackle the most widespread and systematic human rights violations faced by persons with mental disabilities. We've got 3 campaigns, and all of these draw their inspiration directly from the text of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The first one, which we call My Home, My Choice, is probably the largest area of our work. This is about tackling institutionalization in all its forms, along with the segregation and other violations that happen inside institutions. Instead, we advocate and litigate to promote the right to independent living in the courts, where we seek legal enforcement of the right to receive support that is necessary to live independently and to be fully included in the community. Our second campaign, called I'm a Person, is about breaking down abusive systems of guardianship and replacing these with support systems for people to exercise their legal capacity. I want to note, even at this point, that guardianship and institutionalization often go hand in hand, particularly in Europe, because guardianship is one of the easiest ways to remove a person's right to decide about where and with whom they choose to live. Guardianship is also a profound barrier to people with disabilities in claiming their human rights. The reason for this is that when people are under guardianship, they can rarely take cases in their own name. Our third campaign is called Schools for All and is about promoting the right to inclusive education for children with disabilities. If we're together to make real human rights progress on any of these issues, we have to be engaged in law, in public policy, and even resource allocation at the state level. This is where, in my opinion, we can find linkages between the CRPD and the SDGs. While the CRPD is a human rights treaty, the SDGs are about making the resources available to produce human development. Our shared task then is to find the synergies and argue that real progress on the SDGs can only take place if this is done with a strong human rights grounding. Indeed, we need to insist as a community that development initiatives work towards the full realization of the rights contained in the CRPD. If we fail to do that, then it seems to me there is a real risk that donors, including the European Union, will fall back into that old charity model of disability, which disempowers people with disabilities rather than recognizing their leadership. I think Peter gave a great outline of how we can connect the SDGs with the CRPD. And I know this is also high on the agenda of the CRPD committee. So while validity is not an OPD, we exist to work under the instructions of people with disabilities themselves. We use our legal expertise to support our partners and others to analyze these issues, the issues being faced by people with disabilities, and transform these into legal claims. We also do public advocacy training and other activities, but the starting point is that the CRPD itself must be understood as a source of binding international law on states who've ratified it. And we want to turn the commitments of states into real, actionable claims at the national level. So we don't just take cases, but we take cases with the specific purpose of promoting real systems change. Taking good cases means looking carefully at the text of the CRPD and the authoritative statements and jurisprudence of the CRPD committee. Whether this is in the national courtrooms in Sofia in Bulgaria, or in Kampala, Uganda, or at regional or international courts and tribunals in Accra, Ghana, or the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. It's crucial that we really understand the legal implications of the CRPD. And many of you know judges are often very conservative, and very few have much knowledge about the CRPD, nor how to actually handle cases concerning persons with disabilities. It's not uncommon that judges say independent living or personal assistance are just social policy topics, rather than recognizing them to be real and actionable rights held by persons with disabilities. As lawyers, our task is to convince them. And this is not just about putting forward ethical arguments, but about the binding nature of international law. So let me come back to shadow reporting and where this fits into the picture. Our experience tells us that the periodic reviews that take place under the CRPD are a real opportunity to advance our human rights goals and can provide very valuable evidence that will support real claims in real courts. So let me give a few practical examples about the benefits of being involved in this process with 3 examples. In Kenya, Validity works with a range of representative organizations of people with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. And in 2014, we published a big report on the right to legal capacity in that country. Unlike as the case is in Europe, there are relatively few people under actual legal guardianship orders. But in reality, the majority of people with disabilities experience restrictions on their legal capacity through informal processes, restrictive practices employed by state authorities, and restrictions they experience in families and their communities. We saw firsthand that this has profound consequences for people with disabilities who told them that it meant that they were placed forcibly in religious institutions, had their land and property confiscated, and that they were even denied the opportunity to marry or have intimate relationships. Of course, all of these are also human rights violations, but many of them flow from the fact that the state has done little to protect the right to legal capacity of people with disabilities to make their own choices. So we worked with our national partners in that country to create a shadow report highlighting these findings. And what we pointed out was that although there are no formal procedures that impact people around guardianship in the country, there is widespread substitute decision-making. I'm pleased to say that our reports and the concluding observation of the committee have recognized informal guardianship to be a real and genuine human rights challenge. And this shows one of the ways where the reality from the ground can influence the conclusions of the committee. Secondly, in Moldova, Validity has long worked on exposing the abusive system of long-term institutionalization of people in that country. Although they say in Moldova they are committed to deinstitutionalization, progress has been very slow, and there are still huge institutions in a relatively small country which warehouse people with disabilities, often for life. Disability activism in Moldova is still quite new, and there are a few OPDs representing people with psychosocial or intellectual disabilities. But on the other hand, Validity and our partners in the country have long been taking legal action on behalf of women with disabilities, some of whom have experienced horrendous forms of violence and sexual abuse inside these places. We worked with our clients in one institution to help them tell their story during the reporting process, directly inputting a shadow report that called for recognition and reparations for the harm that they have experienced. And I'm very proud to say that our team worked hard to get a passport and visa for one of our clients. And for the first time, she was released from that institution and traveled in person to Geneva to provide her testimony in person to the CRPD committee. I can still remember the impact it had on the experts to hear from this woman herself. We uncovered the truth about the abuse faced by people in these institutions, something that the state party had conveniently left out of their own official reports to the UN. The committee adopted very strong recommendations calling for justice and the dismantling of these awful institutions. And we have now, in practical terms, been able to use these statements in litigation for our clients, with their cases now pending before the European Court of Human Rights. Again, being involved in the shadow reporting process has strengthened our hands and brought the possibility of justice closer. Finally, and another key issue that Enil, Validity, and many of us have been concerned about in recent years is the persistent problem of member states of the EU using European funds in a way that sustains, maintains, and in many cases expands the institutionalization of people with disabilities across the continent. We know that this is happening in Bulgaria, in Hungary, in Poland, in Estonia, right across the continent. And hundreds of millions of euros are being used to maintain this old abusive system. Despite the fact that we've all been advocating for years on these issues, the European Commission has been slow to admit the problem and has completely failed to take any real action against member states. Yet, again and again, in our shadow reports with partners across Europe, we have provided evidence to the CRPD committee that governments in the EU alike are violating Article 19 of the Convention through these investments. And I'm pleased to say, again and again, the CRPD is calling out states for misusing EU funds. The EU, of course, itself is a party to the Convention, And during its own first periodic review in 2015 before the committee, the CRPD committee had some stern recommendations calling on it to prevent funding being used to strengthen institutionalization. Nevertheless, the Commission hasn't acted very well, but all is not lost. The previous concluding observations on the EU have already given us a very strong basis to take legal action against the EU and member states. And next year, we expect that the EU will be gearing up for its second periodic review before the committee. This is going to be a crucial opportunity for all of us across Europe to raise our voices and demand an end to the wrong-headed public financing policies of the past, and for us to force the EU to answer for its failure to take action so far. I encourage you all to get involved through preparing shadow reports, documenting the information you have from your countries about these issues to ensure that the CRPD committee itself is fully informed. The other crucially important reason to be involved is about how CRPD concluding observations can in fact be used for other advocacy as donors under the SDGs. Colleagues, I know this all sounds daunting and complex, but I want to ensure you that shadow reporting to the CRPD committee is a powerful platform to advance your objectives. Without your input, the CRPD committee will only have state reports to rely on. But with your input, they can hear the truth. And I can say in our experience, the committee members are real experts who are devoted to transformational change and true implementation of the convention at the national level. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Validity if you'd like any advice or guidance or support on engaging with the shadow reporting process. Thank you very much. Back over to you, Nadia.
Thank you very much, Stephen, with your very clear message. And to highlight again, you started with highlighting that it's legal binding, and you ended up by encouraging all of us to join the movement and to actively participate in shadow reporting and also in implementation of the CRPD. Thank you very much. And that legal capacity is something that we really need to continually work on it. Thanks a lot, Stephen. So we will end up with our last speaker, who is from Disability Rights Defenders, and she will explain their experience of the use of the optional protocol to the CRPD. So we have with us today Susan Berg, and she has a background on working and being involved in the disability rights and independent living movement since the 1980s. So she's the chair of the Disability Rights Defenders Sweden, an organization aimed at countering disability-related discrimination. So Susan, we are very happy to have you with us, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon and greetings from a rather grey and dismal and slightly cold Stockholm. We're running a bit late. I'm going to try to do my best to kind of make it short. I am sharing a PowerPoint with you on the screen now. I'm going to, everything that is in the PowerPoint, I'm going to talk about. And if there's something special in it, I will mention it, especially. I need to, sorry. Anyway, this is the first kind of, the first PowerPoint is about the organization and this kind of talk here. And this talk is about how we have used individual complaints procedures under the CRPD optional protocol to further try to change the outcome in certain legal cases that we have supported in Sweden. Disability Rights Defenders is quite a new organization. We changed the names a year or so ago. Before that, our name was Med lagen som verktyg, with law as tool, but we changed it to be more kind of succinct, and also to kind of note that we are part of an international movement. The organization is very small, and it's entirely funded by fees from members who are individual persons, support members who are organizations or entities that has any sort of connection to disability. We have applied for and gotten some smaller project budgets, and we have the possibility of receiving donations. That said, we have a very, very small budget, and all tasks are performed by volunteers, and the legal support are provided pro bono by lawyers that are connected to us. Our aim then is to defend and advance human rights for people with disabilities and counter disability-based discrimination in Sweden. That said, it means that we are not involved in cases that are under the social rights, or say individual social rights area in Sweden, because those are basically handled through the administrative court system. We are concerned with the discrimination cases that are handled within the ordinary court system, where you sue individuals or organizations, you sue companies and other entities, legal entities, because you think that you feel that you have been discriminated at. So this is our main focus, is that we support individual members who feel that they've been discriminated, and we support them by finding lawyers or legal professionals that can help them pro bono. We also cover some of the costs for doing this, some of the administrative fees, for example, for putting stuff into the court system. That said, we can only sue for a minimum remuneration. What's it called? When you sue for minimum sums, because under the Swedish Discrimination Act, if you sue for a large amount, you will also run the risk of having to cover your opponent's costs, and which we cannot do. That said, we are taking on some cases where we can see that this has a principal kind of view, and that can be furthering the view of what consists discrimination in Sweden. So the cases that are not, for example, taken by the Equality Ombudsman, or who takes cases which are clearly viewed as discrimination, we try to take the cases that are in the forefront of the gray area, which means that we run the risk of losing in court, which is what I think you should do, because if you don't run the risk of losing, you're not pushing things forward. So that said, we do also take cases to the CRPD committee under the optional protocol. And we've done that in a couple of cases now. And this is basically based on the experience we had on one case that came back in 2020, last fall. The Swedish government ratified both the CRPD convention and the optional protocol. And this is, of course, the main reason that we are able to actually take individual complaints to the committee. Because if your government hasn't ratified or put the optional protocol into force in your country, you will not be able to make an individual case. The individual complaints procedures is enabled in the optional protocol in the same way as the inquiry process is, that Anita from DPAC talked about before. So these are two added tools that you can use to make the shadow reporting more effectful, I would say. And I think we need a more effectful shadow reporting. The second PowerPoint here is Article 1 that just basically gives this right to individual citizens in the countries if your country, if your state has signed the protocol. And also there is a link in my PowerPoint. I have put some links in this PowerPoint, and if any of you want the PowerPoints or a PDF with the links available, you can just tell me and I could probably transfer them to you through PDAR. There's a link to an article who tells you that about the Swedish version of the English DPAC initiated inquiry, which is extremely similar and is done in the same way and in the same areas, independent living and social security. So that said, the Swedish government's response to these kind of things in the shadow reporting is nothing to see here, pass on, in the same way as the English government or the UK government is. So what you have to do to get the complaints into the committee is that it has a very straightforward or kind of strict, I would say, process. It was not as strict when we sort of appealed this case that I'm using as a base for this talk, but it is now. And then you can find how this is done in how you have to fill in a complaint form, and there is also guidance note to this. And this is also in the same way as we talked about before. It has a limited number of words for the different areas in the complaint form, which has its own benefits and challenges. So there are certain things that you have to make sure of. Your government has to have, or the state, should I say, I'm a Swede, we talk about the government. You have to have signed on to the optional protocol of the CRPD. The author of the communication or the person complaining must be the victim of the human rights violation or someone that has the right to act on their behalf. You can't just put in like a general kind of complaints. You can have a legal representative or a non-legal representative and or both, but this is not necessary. You cannot have sent this case to any other international human rights mechanism. The committee needs to be the one. And you have to, before you send it in, you have to exhaust domestic remedies, i.e. push the case through all possible court in Sweden. Which means in itself that it's quite a lengthy and time-consuming and resource-consuming process. You present the case then in two parts. You have the facts of the case and the claims. And then you send these in together with a translation of necessary documents, for example, laws or court decisions. And you send this into the petition and urgent actions section of the OHCHR. This third PowerPoint is just an illustration of how much is actually demanding. And there's a lot of crucial decisions when you formulate the facts, you present the facts and claims needs to be taken. Because you have a form, and in that you have the facts, which can be a maximum 2,500 words, and you have a claims portion, which is a maximum of 600 words. That said, that means that you have to make some decision on what is the important things and how do you present them to actually get the committee to understand the issue in the best way possible. This, in our case, means that you really need a lawyer or somebody who is a legal profession and or somebody who has like a real experience in this. As you see below, you have then Annex 3 4, 5, and 6, and 7, of which 4 of them are basically legal laws and court decisions, and you have to have these translated, which also is quite resource demanding. So this is not an easy kind of case to do. I have here a PowerPoint about the case, and in the end of it is a summary of it that you can say. But basically, Salin, who was the author of the complaint, applied for the job as a lecturer at one of Swedish university. He had previously been temporarily hired at this university. Salin is deaf and used sign language to communicate. The university knew of this need for sign language interpretation because he's already been working there. He was also, which is not contested in any of the processes, the most qualified candidate for the position. And after a while, the university decided to cancel the recruitment process. They actually pulled back the job offer that was advertised. And this was done in May 2016, and claiming that it would be too expensive to finance sign language interpretation for Celine to work there. The university did not consider alternative forms of work adaptations or reasonable accommodations that include in the task of that would not require interpretation. And they did not discuss any of this with Salin. There was no dialogue. So Salin went to the Swedish Equality Ombudsman, DO, that sued on behalf of him under the Swedish Discrimination Act. The DO, when they take a case, they basically take it on and they act as your proxy, meaning that they will carry the case through the court system as they see fit. And they decided that they would focus on the costs. And so this is the only thing that was taken up in the labor court. And the labor court then decided that the university had not discriminated against the author, considering that the appointment had been cancelled because they viewed it was too expensive for the university to finance the required sign language interpretation. And they found it was not reasonable to demand this. The case then came to us, and we took it onwards to the CRPD committee, and we had to argue 2 parts of it. First, that it was admissible, and then we had to argue the facts. This is just to say that there's a rules of procedure that the committee use when they do this, and these are also quite useful to read. I will just say that the committee decided to take the case, and I need to. The points of issues we can consider from this and what we can learn from this was, had the author exhausted possible domestic remedies? Well, there was a way of challenging the procedure of pulling back the offer, the job offer, canceling the recruitment procedures. This had to be done within the administrative courts. And the Swedish government argued that this was not exhausted. The committee decided that it doesn't matter because that would not have actually had any impact on whether or not courts decided this was discrimination or not. So it is not necessarily to exhaust all possible domestic remedies, just the ones that actually deal with the discrimination itself. And the DO suit are arguing that the reasonableness of the cost, arguing that the costs were reasonable, and did not raise the issue of alternative reasonable accommodation because they viewed that this was what they wanted to go for. And then the question was it enough that Celine had pushed for this in his contact with the discrimination ombudsman and in his communication to the court? And this, the committee viewed as this was enough because the Equality Ombudsman is a state authority, and should have considered his views as well. So in spite of this, they also, yeah, I can try to wrap on it up in 2 minutes. Yes. So we can try, yes, anyway. So these were the 2 main issues. What the committee thought was important, what they did say that it was discrimination, it was not because they checked whether a cost was reasonable or not, but because the actual proceedings or process of reasonable accommodations were not met through the Swedish system. And that in itself is interesting because it gives a right to agency to disabled people. You cannot simply decide that this is reasonable or not without actually discussing with us about the possibilities of other things and reasonable accommodations. So the committee viewed that the Swedish state had discriminated against Salin based on the fact that they hadn't followed the procedures that are in place or how reasonable accommodations should be handled. And this is quite interesting. I think it would be useful for a lot of us to look into, because this seems to have developed within the committee, because there were dissenting comments in the case of Jungelin versus Sweden before, where it was considered not discrimination by the committee that had some of these issues in it. So the committee seems to have developed its view of reasonable accommodation and what is. What I can say is that the committee said that the state should provide effective remedy to the individual and also cover his costs. They should publish the views, and they should also in general ensure that this was not going to be happening again. The unfortunate thing is that Sweden has recently answered, and Sweden basically says straight to the committee, we are not obliged to compensate any individuals. And we are doing all these nice things for disabled people already, so we do not see the need to do any more. And this is exactly the attitude. So Sweden basically saying to the committee that we're not obliged to compensate the individual, and we already do all these things that you think is necessary. So we basically are not going to do anything about this. And this is the attitude that is replicated in the country reports and in the answers to the committee's list of issues. So then the question I have is, how do we handle this when governments act like this? That's me.
Okay, thank you very much, Suzanne, for sharing this experience with us and highlighting also the importance of going on. And indeed, the question is, what if governments had that laxitude of behavior?
Well, you've heard it before in almost all of the presentation. It's there, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. It's not like any of us have any basically really positive experience from shadow reporting or inquiries, or I don't know. Maybe I'm not as positive as some of you are. Yep.
But at least it's something that's in our reach to do. It's better than do nothing, and it's a blame and shame, and we say openly, loudly and proudly that it's not in line with defending our rights through this type of reporting. And we keep it as when the recommendation comes out, we keep it as a kind of yeah, it's enforce us to continue lobby work. Otherwise, we risk to regress. So
yeah, I'm not saying that we're not going to do it. I said that we need to figure out how to use them together. It's not enough to just do them.
No.
We need to have a better strategy.
That's for sure. So that's why it's now an open question how we can join forces And I will hand over now to Peter, who's going to moderate the question and answering session. But we need to take this further, Suzanne, it's true. We need to join forces and see how also legally we could develop something to enforce all rights. Thank you anyway. Thank you for all the speakers. And now, Peter, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you to all the wonderful speakers. They were very interesting presentations. So, yeah, I'm still waiting. Again, to just let people know, you can leave questions and answers. You can leave questions or comments for the panelists in the Q&A box or in the chat box, and I will read them out. While people are writing those, I guess I will just start with a generic, with a question myself. I guess I guess this is for anyone really to answer. What options are available for disabled activists if their state has not signed the optional protocol of the CRPD and seems to be giving no indication that it's going to sign the optional protocol of the CRPD? For instance, Ireland ratified the convention in 2018, but it quite noticeably didn't sign the protocol despite demands for it to do so, and it doesn't seem to be in a hurry to sign the protocol. So what's the best way for activists to proceed with channel reporting and to hold the government to account over the CRPD if they refuse to sign the protocol? Yeah, anyone can answer that.
Stephen has his hand on.
Okay, yeah, Stephen, do you want to go first?
Sure, happy to say something on this, Peter. I agree that there are challenges in holding state accountability for the CRPD, and the optional protocol is a useful mechanism, but of course, it's not the only one. Just to say, I know that strong advocacy by organizations of people with disabilities in many countries has prompted governments to take steps to ratify the optional protocol. But even if they don't, I think we need to also talk with lawyers about other creative ways, as I was mentioning, of getting the CRPD itself into national courts. Sometimes this is a legal question about how the constitution of the country works, but some countries allow you to argue directly international law, including articles of the CRPD in national courts. I would strongly advocate trying for that. And of course, there are other mechanisms that exist here in the European Union, for example, that we can talk about. Where we can hold accountability, for example, of the European Commission in the European Court of Justice or the Court of Justice of the EU. So the optional protocol is one method, but I would say it's not the only one, and we need to be creative, I think, as Suzanne also said, about how we get this before the courts.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, there's
Suzanne has her hand also.
Yeah, Suzanne, do you want to go?
Oh God, no, you can't be here now. Yeah, I would agree with Stephen about this. In Sweden, we have the case that the European Convention and now also the Convention of the Child is made into Swedish legislation. Basically, you take the convention and you put it into Swedish law as it is, while the other conventions are viewed as incorporated, but not in that legal capacity. And it is a better use of the conventions if you can manage to get them, your government, to actually enact them as a specific law. So we are trying sometimes to, instead of going through the CRPD, we're talking about using the European Convention, because that should be also interpreted in the way of taking into consideration the CRPD articles. So that is one way you can go, but it's in my opinion very hard to get states to want to do this, because that it present an actually real challenge to them. It is a good way to go.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I agree. Yeah, I think I agree with your and Stephen's assessment. If anyone, I see a question from Anne Galpin in the comments, unless anybody else wants to briefly answer my optional protocol one, or if not, I can, I'll read Anne's question. I think it's aimed at everyone. So it's what options for activists and disabled people's organizations, what options are there for activists and disabled people's organizations when the government, state parties is ignoring our voices, e.g. UK government screen paper on health and disability, which seems to ignore UNCRPD, as well as having ignored DPAC and other DPOs throughout the drafting process. So yeah, if Catherine, maybe could I throw that one to you? If there's yeah, what other options are there for DPOs if it seems the government is not willing to actually engage with them?
Thank you, Peter. Yes, and thank you for your question. And it's there is actually the committee discussed about this option. This is a very common concern from different organizations of persons with disabilities, that is related to the meaningful participation, and the fact that really consultations or participation is not superficial, but it takes into consideration the opinions of civil society. So this is a challenge which I think is shared by in different countries, at different levels of organizations, civil society organizations, and the committee has already discussed what can organizations do, and the committee emphasized that state parties to the convention should first take into consideration opinions and voices, and if these opinions, voices, contributions of civil society do not find a place in the decision-making process, state parties should explain and provide the reasons why not, why are dismissing the opinions and recommendations from civil society. I was at the same time trying to look at the general comment number 7 of the committee, because there is a specific paragraph in this general comment in which the committee emphasizes that organizations, that the state parties should establish mechanisms, which means legal actions or complaint procedures for organizations of persons with disabilities, which would like to be to have access to a remedy in case their opinions were not heard during the decision making process. So to ensure that participation is not a tokenistic issue, but is a real participation mechanism. If you allow me for a minute, if any other person in the panel or the panelist has ideas or has done something at the national level, but I would like to look and to try to make the specific reference to this type of remedies and actions that the committee consider. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Catherine, for that. That was a very good answer, and thank you. Does anyone else want to briefly answer that question?
Peder, I would just maybe jump into the question we received from Susan.
Yes, okay, sorry. Yes.
Can
you read it out? Can you read it out?
Yeah, it's connected. So it says, does Anil have an experience of using the EU ratifying the CRPD to strengthen this? It's a very good question, and it's something we were, let's say, struggling for some time, because we keep underlying this in our discussions with the EU institutions, the fact that the EU as such, besides all members, also ratified the CRPD, but is still often seen as a UN document, unfortunately. So it is an ongoing debate. I mean, lately we saw also, you know, also from the EU institution side, you know, more reminding more and highlighting more the importance of the CRPD. But we face often that well, the CRPD is not respected. That I can say, for example, when it comes to the use of EU funds also. And we are here basically to remind that obligation, you know. But I don't know if Catherine also maybe can say, you know, on the EU ratification of the CRPD, maybe and obligations and experience. It's very challenging.
Thank you, Natasha. In the meantime, I found a reference to the mechanisms to enforce this obligation of state parties concerning participation. So I just would like to quickly make reference to them. Is paragraph 66 in the General Comment number 7 and paragraph 94. I have just copy and paste the paragraphs for you to have them more clear. And about the using the EU ratifying the convention. I can say that the participation during the review, like the ratification of the European Union as an organization is really, of the convention, is really like a new issue in terms of the United Nations treaties, because usually it's state parties which ratify. So this is like the first thing, which is already remarkable, that an organization decided to really welcome and to join the world in this new legislative framework with respect to persons with disabilities. So definitely this should be, or this could be, the first point that one can make in advocating before the European Union, because the European Union had not an obligation. All regional organizations are invited to do so. but it was not an obligation, but the European Union decided to ratify the convention. As after having ratified it, it means that it really welcomes and that it really commits itself to develop a framework to implement the convention. So all the obligations that are binding, legally binding for all state parties are also legally binding for the European Union. And the European Union, because of being a regional organization, doesn't have a different treatment or a different status or a specific status vis-a-vis other state parties to the convention. So I think this is something that it is important to highlight, that in this aspect, the European Union is playing like in the same, with the same rules, and is equally bound by the convention as any other state party to the convention. And second, like participation of persons with disabilities in the review of the initial report of the European Union was also like meaningful, and organizations of persons with disabilities have like the same role in interacting with the committee and preparing their alternative reports, and also to mention what is the level of participation at the European Union, as if they were reporting concerning their level of participation, and if that participation is meaningful at a country level. So it is exactly the same, and I think it is something that it should be like assessed and considered and analyzed with the same kind of indicators or like minimum threshold that the committee demands or requires from other state parties, that the convention requires from state parties with regard to the European Union. Those are like only initial ideas, but of course it is something to build up on, because if we know that we have different articles in the convention supporting participation and involvement in decision making. This means that organizations at the regional or civil society organizations at the European level should be like aware of what are the mechanisms at the European Union in which they can participate, and that the European Union, as any other state party, should establish like formal mechanisms for persons with disabilities through the representative organizations to participate, and also to take their views, their opinions, their voices into account, and if they are not, or if they are for a reason disregarding those opinions, to explain to civil society first why not, to give the reasons, and to provide a remedy concerning this lack of participation. These are some ideas that emerge now. Thank you. And over to you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine, for that. That was great. Thank you all. I think we are coming close to the end now, since we were due to finish at 2 p.m. Central European time. So yeah, I think we should leave it there. I would just like to thank all the wonderful panelists, and I would like to thank my technical team of Natasha, Michael, and Camille, who is not here, but he hoped to be in some of this event. Yeah, and thank you to Julia, our captioner, as well. The event will be available to rewatch on the YouTube channel after this live session has ended, and you can get in touch with the panelists, maybe if they're happy for their emails to be shared after the event. And if you want to follow up with them or ask them any other questions you think of, and you can get in touch with us on email as well, and we'll try to help you. Yeah, I think that's it. So I thank you everybody for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day and also the rest of the Freedom Surf events that we have coming up. Make sure you register. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you and bye.